My brother had just returned from Iraq, and he'd lost several of his men from IEDs, improvised explosive devices. And I wanted to say, can you help? And so then that's when I approached the Marines. And I knew it had to be fast and it had to be effective. I had only 3 months to develop this program. And in that 3 months, the pilot, it was a full Department of Defense experiment. We had a control platoon that was randomly chosen, and my platoon of 40 guys that I worked with. Worst platoon in the battalion, a lot of post-traumatic stress from IED attacks and a helicopter crash. They were failing their pre-deployment objectives, and 3 months later, when I developed a program with them and took them through it, they were not only the best performing platoon in that battalion, but now one of the best ever to go through final pre-deployment training.
Welcome to Season 4 of the Manage Self, Lead Others podcast with Nina Sunday, CSP, for experienced and aspiring people managers. This show helps you explore ways to become a more intentional leader. Each episode, host Nina Sunday speaks with some of the brightest business minds on the planet who share a passion to elevate and transform team culture. Workplace culture hides in plain sight. Is yours flourishing? Join the movement to make your workplace a better place to work. Are you ready? Because it's time to manage self, lead others.
John Kennedy is a process efficiency consultant turned brain coach in applied neuroplasticity to help people achieve peak performance. John Kennedy's brain training method increases mental and cognitive agility. The secret is rewiring brain connections for faster thinking speed, improved focus, memory, and faster, better decision making. John Kennedy's online course is a once-a-week video module, then spending 10 minutes a day doing the process. You'll find it at braintraining.learnworlds.com. Use coupon code Nina Sunday for a listener discount. Early in his career, John Kennedy was a project rescue specialist before he collaborated with the US military to support elite military units including pilots, snipers, and Navy SEALs. John now helps leaders and teams exceed their performance expectations, resulting in fast, unparalleled results. Welcome, John Kennedy.
Hi, Nina. I'm really excited to be here.
I understand that you've got this brain training online workshop, but also you're a neuroplastician, and it was some interaction with the US Marines that really got you started. So please tell us about that.
Yes, it's kind of an interesting journey. My background really was as a consultant to the C-level of big companies, Motorola, Aon, and I developed a proprietary process approach to improve teamwork. So I worked with a lot of teams and rescue projects out of control. So I love doing that. And then the Marines gave my chance. They gave me a contract in 2007 to develop a program with two goals. One was to improve war fighting so we would reduce casualties, but the other was to actually accelerate recovery from the wounds of war. So two completely different goals on the surface, but the common denominator for that is our brains. And so my hypothesis was if I could do to the brain what I do for businesses and make the brain more efficient, we would be able to accomplish both those objectives. So I presented my idea to the Marine Corps, and they said, let's give it a try. Now, what made it unique was not just my approach to process improvement, but research out of MIT at the time found that a very specific type of stimulation would start to change the brain immediately, not just in a day or a week or a month. So I used that stimulation with my process, applied it to the brain with specific cognitive skills, and the results were just amazing. So with the Marine Corps, it was extremely effective, and not just regular Marines, but Marine Corps shooting teams, scouts, snipers. It spread to Navy SEALs, pilots, almost every elite unit in the military I had a chance to work with.
So their
this format.
Reaction time improved and their accuracy improved? Was it a combination?
Well, yes, exactly. And so everything we do goes through our brain, right? So our brains really are the key to our success. And if we can improve our brain's ability to think faster, make better decisions, so that applies to combat situation, applies to shooting, it applies to negotiations, relationships. When that process is faster, plus focus is improved, we can actually achieve something called flow state, or being in the zone. There's a lot of programs out there that claim to improve flow state, but they're psychologically based, which is the mind. They deal with the mind. Now, they're good programs, but my program is the only one that actually specifically targets the brain to get into flow state. So my athletes, my business people, they can get into flow state at will very, very quickly.
And describe the flow state. I mean, I was just thinking the other day when I was a musician playing the violin in a band in my youth, there were three identifier occasions where I felt as if I had so much kinesthetic memory that the fingers were playing the violin themselves. Yeah. I wasn't really consciously controlling them.
Right.
Well, I was playing music, a song I already knew, but it just played itself.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what flow state is. So one of our neuroscientists from Northwestern said that my program does, it optimizes system 1 thinking, which is fast and unconscious, and system 2 thinking, which is slow and conscious. When they become optimized, your brain processes unconsciously without thinking about it. And then that frees up your conscious, right, to be much more aware, to be not worried and other things. And all of a sudden, you look back and everything's done. And it's interesting. So our model is perfect. And I've actually worked with musicians in almost all instruments. We actually have, from our neuroplasticity perspective, now neuroplasticity is the ability of our brains to change from stimulation. So everything you repeat, say, or even think repeatedly makes those ruts deeper. And our model has 3 different levels of that. We have the procedural, which is the things you do, which is what we call muscle memory, right? Like you said, you practice over and over again, it becomes unconscious, not because the body is changed so much, but the brain is changing. Now, that's kind of like a computer. Those are the applications of a computer. Now, the operating system would be psychology. Now, that's also important, but you also have to repeat over and over again what, the psychologist wants you to do. Now, the fastest way to improve your computer is to get a new one because the processor is faster. And so that's what I do. So when the processor is faster and more focused, psychology improves, self-confidence and self-belief, as well as everything that we do. So better violinists, better relationships, better throwing a ball. It doesn't matter what you do. If it's connected to the brain, it will improve.
So I just want to get early into the conversation a little bit about the fact that you do have an online course that people can access your brain training, as well as managers of companies could access it and apply, give it available to their teams. So the actual course itself is a video explanation, but the process is a worksheet that you print off on paper, and you don't have to have the computer on to do the process. You can actually, if anybody comes to the video version, I've got a copy of it, just briefly.
Exactly.
But there's a process, it's a colored arrows that you just identify one at a time, and then there's other levels of it. So that's what I think is wonderful, is that it's a combination of the video plus the actual process is analog. You could fold it up and put it in your satchel and have it in a coffee shop.
Yep. Right. And an analog interface actually makes our brain work harder. Now, I'm glad you showed people what that looks like. So when we experimented with the Marine Corps, we had all different kinds of symbols, but we settled on arrows because it's the simplest symbol that requires a decision. You look at an arrow, you define, that's an up arrow, that's a left arrow. Now, if you had color, you make 2 different decisions from the same data set. And our brains are wired so magnificently that if we give the brain a task to do, it will try its hardest to make that happen. So because the arrows are so simple, the brain thinks it's doing something simple, but there's massive work going on. So connections are made throughout the brain, all parts of the brain, memory, dopamine is released, so it helps with addictions. We've got endorphins going on, oxytocin going on. So all that work your brain's doing just to do something simple. And that's why kids, as well as, Navy SEALs or performers, high-performing executives, they can all do the exercises because they're designed to be so simple, even though the brain will change physically where it needs to in order for you to do that.
And what I've been doing is, look, if you want an edge, it's almost imperceivable where the difference between not having the edge and having the edge. but I've been using it. Say I've got a challenging, I've got a challenging presentation to give, or just before a podcast.
Yeah.
That's when I've been pulling it out and doing it, because
Yeah.
I'll only notice if I don't have the edge, if I don't do it. It's kind of a paradox. But if I
Right.
do it,
Right.
I also, it's
Right.
self-fulfilling prophecy. I feel as if I've got the edge anyway. So it works at that
Right.
level.
Right, right. No, and you're right, and that's why, like everyone, like we have a 1 minute neuroprimer, which you experience. We have a 5 step neuroprimer, and if you run through the 1 step neuroprimers, as you said a few times, my athletes do it, my students do it. They do better in school. My business people make better decisions. It's kind of like a primer that gets your brain primed. Now, most of our work has always been with an instructor, right? So we customize as we go along. We developed that video series basically so we could help a lot more people, right? So the video series takes you through the basics. And a lot of people, they'll start with a video series and then they'll just hire one of us. Because I've been able to certify people. I've certified psychiatrists, business coaches, sports trainers. When they're certified, they can actually add this program to their existing programs, or help their patients or clients or athletes with it. But a great way to start is with the video series. The uniqueness of my program is that I have took a business approach to the brain using neuroplasticity. So no one had ever done that before. A lot of my research was done by taking a neuroscientist or a psychiatrist or a psychologist through the program, and then they would tell me what's happening. Then I didn't have to do the research because they were already experts. And one of them said this never could have come from traditional research because it's so reductionist in nature. I was actually a process consultant, so I worked for the C-level of the highest levels, and really big projects. Probably the largest project I managed was the entire Y2K transition for a division of Motorola. 20 countries around the world, thousands of people. And so and they were way behind, right? If you guys remember Y2K, if they're old enough, that's a deadline that wasn't going to move, right? So they brought me in when they were behind, and I got them all on track. And I worked a lot of projects like that where they were way behind, and I was able to get them together. 2 reasons. One, by uniting the team. So I do a lot of good team building work, but at the same time, defining the critical processes and staying on that track and getting it done. And that's actually the approach that I brought to the brain.
So you were a process improvement specialist who then started working with neuroscientists, who then that intrigued you to the point where you actually were able to say, or do a what if question. What if we found a process improvement that used neuroscience to improve how people operate in the workforce?
Actually, no. That's good. No, that's very normal. And so when I talk at brain conferences, we talk about this all the time. What I did, so I was a consultant, right? When you're a consultant, you either are successful or you get fired, right? That's the way it is. Now, this was a very important project for me. My brother had just returned from Iraq, and he'd lost several of his men from IEDs, improvised explosive devices. Wow. And I wanted to say, can you help? And so then that's when I approached the Marines, and I knew it had to be fast and it had to be effective. I had only 3 months to develop this program. And in that 3 months, it was a full Department of Defense experiment. We had a control platoon that was randomly chosen, and my platoon of 40 guys that I worked with. Worst platoon in the battalion, a lot of post-traumatic stress from IED attacks and a helicopter crash. They were failing their pre-deployment objectives, and 3 months later, when I developed the program with them and took them through it, they were not only the best performing platoon in that battalion, but now one of the best ever to go through final pre-deployment training. It was so the results were so far beyond what we expected. But because it was a life and death situation for me, I knew I had to work. And so the results in this case came before research. Most programs are research-based, which can take years and years and years. I had no time as a consultant. I had no time. We needed results right away. And then I've backfilled the research since. So that's when neuroscientists, psychiatrists, when I present at conferences, I learn a lot about the research behind it that supports it.
Well, you had a compelling reason to come up with a process. Yes. Because of your connection with your brother.
He inspired me to. It was a platoon of the Marines that I was able actually to work with. I was able to get a Marine General Doug Stone, who said, let's give this a try. because they were looking for things outside the box, some sort of innovation, in which this was. And then that's how it spread throughout the Marine Corps. And
And
then,
what's
as I
lovely
said,
about
SEALs,
that?
snipers.
And what's lovely about that, John, is you were following the breadcrumbs, you were following the trail, and the trail led you down certain paths that has now become your life work.
Right, exactly. And what I do now, which I love so much, is I've combined all of this. So now when I work with a team or a company, we can do the brain training. So everybody, emotional intelligence improves, overall efficiency improves. They start a meeting with a few minutes of this, and the meetings are done in half the time and they get more done. I can also introduce the habit piece, right? Because we create behavioral change because habits hold us back. And then I can bring in my process work. So the whole thing is what makes up the Kennedy method. So it's process centric, but it's brain, behavior, and operations, all of which can become more efficient.
That's absolutely wonderful. And so if people can actually use my code, they'll get a discount. They can get the course, and it's only a couple of $100. So it's not super
Yeah, I
expensive.
mean,
It's very affordable, especially
right.
if you're a manager wanting to work with your team. And of course, you're based in which state in the USA?
I'm actually based in Las Vegas right now in Nevada,
Yes.
but
So,
I work with people and teams all over the world via Zoom.
right.
So
Well,
they
this
can
this
also work with
podcast
me.
goes to Africa, Asia, Europe, all over the
Oh,
world.
perfect.
So
And I
anybody
have
can be
through
working with you. Hmm.
Absolutely. So athletes. One of my clients was just in the World Cup. We work with athletes all over the world. I have some certified trainers who are excellent in different areas. So business students, teachers, anyone who they have to be committed to they will have to be committed to wanting to improve themselves, and then they're perfect
That's
for us.
right. So there has to be a will to want to up level their performance, and then you come along with the skill, which is a technique,
Right.
and it's one that's so usable because I like the fact that it's on a piece of paper and you can actually write
That's
down
right.
the instructions, and there's multiple different this time you add a fruit and this time you do something else, or you do color
Yes.
arrow, up, down, whatever. And it's like there's about 9 different processes when you did it with me.
Well, it's interesting. There's actually an unlimited number, and so what happens is the goal is one to improve speed, another anticipation. Anticipation we happen really fast. So when you can anticipate, it means if you're an athlete, you can anticipate what's happening right before it happens. If you're driving a car, if you're having a conversation, if you're playing music, if you can anticipate unconsciously what's going to happen. Probably the best example is an Olympic skier I trained a few years ago. She said she's going down the hill at 100 miles an hour, right? Much faster than I could. She said she can ski much faster without falling because she can see the snow conditions further out. Now, obviously, her eyes are the same and the snow is the same, but because she's anticipating, she has this buffer of anticipation out in front of her that gives her that little bit of time unconsciously where she can make the adjustments.
Do you know what? I've just found I've just thought of another cohort. I have a friend who had a knee replacement, and what's happening now is there's a delay between her anticipating a step or something. She's fallen over and
Yeah.
hurt herself twice
Oh,
because of
no.
some slowness of the message getting to the brain
Yes.
that she needs to
Yes.
self-correct when she's walking.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, one of my clients was an orthopedic surgeon. Now, on a side story, he can now do a 6-hour operation in 2 hours. That's how efficient he is. But we have actually experimented with rehab. And what happens is when your brain is making decisions while it's moving your body, those connections become much stronger and faster. And when we engage the hands and the legs, like for her, if we would want to do this, it'll re-energize those connections. We'll make those connections faster and stronger to her feet. I'm actually helping someone with MS right now regain use of her feet. Someone with cerebral palsy regain the use of his hands. Someone with a stroke, we can rewire. So anytime we can rewire those connections, we can make improvements.
I can think of somebody with Parkinson's who might be very interested to contact you for. You can do one-on-one over Zoom.
Yes, one-on-one via Zoom or one on Teams or whatever. Most of it's
Wow.
one-on-one
That's incredible.
Yeah.
You're doing great work. So tell us one more case study, and then I'm afraid, we've sort of coming to the end of our time. Give us one more example of one more use of this process.
Sure. Well, I could talk more about my athletes. I work with professional
Yes.
athletes, now one of the top goalies in the world. But probably my favorite is a young woman who was a musician. She was an opera singer. She was in New York auditioning for La Boheme. She was in a tree taking a selfie with her boyfriend. She fell down and landed on top of her head. She was in a coma for 4 months. So I started working with her, and she could barely speak or use her hands. So I worked with her for many, many months. Now she can sing, she can play the piano, she can swing a golf club and a tennis club, and we're working on her balance because she hardly could walk before. So that's rewiring the brain tremendously. And she's such a wonderful woman, and just I'm so excited because of the progress she's made. And she's obviously working hard at this. But just to see that change is just, to me, it's very meaningful.
I'm really impressed by the wide application of this. I didn't really realize until we were speaking that it would be so important that people understand that there is this process available to them. So I really appreciate the fact that I think it did come from God.
Yes, I think so. I tell you, it's healing. It's amazing. I'm humbled actually and blown away sometimes by what happens to people.
Yeah, and you
really
are
amazing.
most worthy to be the recipient of this amazing information too, because you're now bringing it forward into the world, and I'm glad I'm now part of that. Passing it on
Yes, well, thank
and
you.
sending it out to the world. So, anybody listening, contact John Kennedy. You're on LinkedIn, aren't you?
I'm on LinkedIn. Yep, and there's a lot of John Kennedys. I realize, so they have to do John Kennedy Neuroplastician, and they should find me.
That's right, and there'll be links in the show notes. So, but sometimes people don't have access to the show notes, so that's fine. They'll find you that way. And if you can't find John because there's too many other Kennedys, direct message me and I'll send you the link. So, thank you so much, John. It's been a real pleasure, and we'll see you again. This episode, we were speaking with John Kennedy about his mental agility training. Want to rewire your brain connections for faster thinking speed, improved focus and memory, and faster, better decision making? Are you an athlete wanting the edge to achieve peak performance? Or do you suffer a chronic health condition affecting messages to the brain? The online brain training is a once-a-week video module, then spending 10 minutes a day doing the process. You'll find the Kennedy method on the web at braintraining.learnworlds.com. For a listener discount, use coupon code Nina Sunday, one word. John Kennedy's book, Hack Your Habits in 30 Minutes or Less, is on Amazon. My name is Nina Sunday. I'm host of Manage Self Lead Others podcast. Thanks for listening, and remember to subscribe to the video versions on our YouTube channel. And until next time, bye for now.
Nina Sunday CSP is on a mission to help leaders transform culture. Nina Sunday travels from Brisbane, Australia to facilitate half-day or full-day workshops at your location anywhere across Australia. For a list of Nina's topics around leading people, productivity and communication, go to brainpowertraining.com.au/signature programs to request a tailored proposal. To book Nina Sunday CSP to speak at your conference in Australia, New Zealand, Asia or internationally, head to ninasunday.com for details.